Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Election Day in Israel for the 5th time in less than 4 years. A key question in today's vote: will former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu return to power?
The final polls are mixed. They show Netanyahu having enough to form a coalition government in 2 of the polls, and in the other 2, he falls just short.
We'll look at his chances and the other top issues facing Israelis. Russian missiles and drones targeting Ukraine's power network and water supply.
The enemy wants ordinary citizens to have neither water, no light, no heat, to watch them freeze and die in front of the whole world.
We'll show you how American missionaries are responding to help in our report from inside Ukraine. The growing danger of anti-Semitism on college campuses here in the United States.
There is a spiritual dynamic here at play. It's very hard to understand the source of anti-Semitism, and it seems to morph in various ages, but there seems to be an underlying hatred against God.
And are you having trouble sleeping? A leading expert shares tips on how to get the rest you need to stay healthy.
They have a bad night of sleep and they'll sleep in an extra 2 hours. But what that does is it kind of throws the whole system off. It actually kind of puts you in jet lag without having any of the benefits of traveling.
All these stories and more are coming up next on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And we begin this half hour with Election Day in Israel. And on the top of everyone's mind, will former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once again be the leader of the Jewish state? Going into today's vote, there is no clear answer. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl takes a look at that question from Jerusalem and other important issues in this election.
Issues in most elections vary from the economy to national security. In this cycle, it's the challenge of forming a stable government to prevent yet another early election.
Last election, as we saw, the party that finished first didn't end up with the Prime Minister's office.
That was in 2021, when political parties from left and right joined together against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
The right has really won in every election, including the one where Netanyahu didn't get to be prime minister. The question is who in the coalition is going to side with someone like Netanyahu and who isn't.
Israelis vote for parties, not candidates. This time, more than 35 parties are competing for 120 Knesset seats.
The fact is that every election there are at least 10 parties that pass this threshold.
In order to join the Knesset, a party must receive 3.25% of the votes. The leader of the party winning the most seats usually works to form a majority coalition. Gilad Malach from the Israel Democracy Institute says the consistent issue during the past 4 years has been Netanyahu himself.
It's even not right-wingers and left-wingers or center left-wingers. It's supporting Netanyahu or against Netanyahu.
CBN political analyst John Wagi adds that this time around, other issues are emerging.
Yair Lapid called for a 2-state solution in front of the United Nations. The fact that they just formed a gas deal with Lebanon, and many Israelis might think that they got the short end of that bargain. The violence that we've seen crop up in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank.
According to voting patterns, Israelis mostly vote conservative. So why the constant division?
One group is banning the other group. Both groups are banning the other group, so there are not a lot of options to build a government.
The final polls are mixed. They show Netanyahu having enough to form a coalition government in 2 of the polls, and in the other 2, he falls just short. The other question you have to ask in the middle of that is, where does Lapid stand? He has a much, much more difficult path to gaining a coalition.
Since 1988, no government has finished its 4-year term, and based on recent results, that pattern will not likely be broken anytime soon. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is joining us now from Jerusalem. So, Chris, many people are wondering if Benjamin Netanyahu can make a political comeback. What are his chances?
Well, actually, they're pretty good, Ephraim. Certainly much better than Yair Lapid. It's possible, it's really crucial number to look for is 61. And there's two factors about whether or not he will get to that number. The first factor is the number of coalition parties that are aligned with Netanyahu, how well they do. And if they do well, that could push him over the 61 or get to the 61 seats to be able to form a coalition government. The other thing, and it's crucial, is actually what parties will cross or not cross what's called the 3.25 threshold. And if some of these parties that maybe go against Netanyahu, if they don't pass that threshold, it changes the math and it changes whether or not Netanyahu could get to that 61 seats.
What are you hearing from Israeli voters today?
Well, CBN News was out on the streets. We talked to many of the voters that were going to the polls, not too far from where we are in the Bureau here. And many of the people are supporting a variety of parties. In fact, Ephraim, there's about 35 parties actually you can go vote for. Only about 8 to 10 parties will likely qualify to get into the Knesset. They have all their individual issues, but there are some main themes happening right now. First of all, let's have an end to this political paralysis. Enough with all these elections. Israelis are tired of going back to the polls again and again. Also, they want a stable government. They want a capable government that will be secure, that will last more than a year like the last government did. And they want to have a secure country. So those are some of the themes that I think go across the Israeli political spectrum. They want no more elections, stable government, and a secure country.
So what happens after the results come in late night tonight, Israel time?
Well, we're going to go to the next stage of what Israelis have been through in the last 4 years. First of all, it's going to take several days for the official results to come in. And then Israel's president, this is really one of the main political acts he has to do as president. He's going to sit down with all the political parties. He's going to ask them who they want to form a government. Then he's going to make a choice. He's going to ask for one of these parties to form a government. That party, perhaps the Likud, Benjamin Netanyahu's party, is going to be able to have 28 days to form a government. They might have 14 days extension. If they can form a government, then we'll see if that happens. If not, he'll choose another party. If that party can't do it, Israelis will go to elections for the 6th time in about 4 years.
All right, Chris Mitchell reporting for us from Jerusalem and following it for us. Thank you so much. I want to turn now to the war on Ukraine. More than 40 Russian missiles hit the country Monday, targeting its critical infrastructure. The attacks left many Ukrainians without power and water as winter weather closes in. But one group of Americans is stepping up to help Ukrainians keep warm this winter. Chuck Holton brings us that story now from inside Ukraine.
Rolling blackouts are hitting Ukraine's capital for the first time since the beginning of the war. Here in the city's largest power plant, technicians are working day and night to repair the system under constant threat of renewed attacks by Russia.
There was not a single military object among the targets. Not a single one. The enemy wants ordinary citizens to have neither water, no light, no heat, to watch them freeze and die in front of the whole war.
We have to be very careful about what we film when it comes to the power infrastructure, because everything power related in Kyiv right now is a target. But the Ukrainians are working very hard to put together teams of people who can fix things that get broken very fast.
The situation is quite difficult. Up to 30 to 40% of the energy infrastructure have been damaged in some way. The energy system is manageable. Together with the emergency services, we are renewing the damaged substations. I am absolutely sure that once the en masse assaults have been stopped, it'll take us from 2 to 3 months when we find ourselves in a situation when the consumers will not be under any restrictions.
So far, the residents of Kyiv are enduring the sporadic outages without losing their spirit, bolstered by news about continued gains by their forces.
Kyiv will stand, Ukraine will not fall. Everyone from the office of president to the municipal worker, men and women, united. Some on the battlefield, some in the rear. We believe in ourselves. We have nowhere to retreat, nowhere to go from here. We are defending our land.
But closer to the front lines, in many liberated settlements across the east, this winter will be more than difficult, and without modern conveniences, could be deadly.
All the normal things that they can count on for winter, that's all been disrupted. And, you know, it's going to be very difficult, I think, for a lot of people to survive this winter.
These American missionaries are stepping into the gap with a fleet of vans to distribute aid to remote villages near the front lines.
A couple of us got a harebrained idea and said, hey, let's buy some vans. Let's see what happens. And now we have 7 vans, and we've had 40 drivers come out so far, and it's been awesome.
Driving supplies into an active war zone carries a hefty amount of risk. But these volunteers say their calling is greater than the danger.
None of us get paychecks to do this. We're all volunteers. A lot of us spend our own money to fill gas tanks, buy hotel rooms. We're willing. We've all made that choice of like, hey, this might cost us our life, but it's the right thing to do. Ultimately, we believe that God's just led us to do this, and that his promise isn't to keep us alive, it's to be with us.
From Ukraine, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Coming up, we're going to hear about the growing dangers of anti-Semitism on college campuses and what's being done to fight it when we come back. The Anti-Defamation League recently released a report highlighting the growing problem of anti-Semitism on college campuses. The report found 350-plus anti-Israel campus incidents during 2021 and the 2022 school year alone, including vandalism, verbal and written harassment, physical assault, and more. Serene Hudson has worked extensively in fighting against anti-Semitism. She's also the vice president of advocacy at Passages, a group that's brought thousands of Christian students to Israel to discover the Jewish roots of their faith. She joins us this week on the Prayer Link program.
Serena, as you know, anti-Semitism is rising around the country, from Kanye West tweets to the LA City Council, and as we just heard in Gary's piece, college campuses. Why is this happening? Why now?
Well, in the report, it said that this is a new strain, but actually we've seen this happening over the last 10 years, where Zionism is equated with racism. And when you have years of this kind of conversation, for me, it's not easy. It's easy to see that that then translates to students on campus being targeted for being Jewish.
Wow. And Serene, 3 large New York colleges recently filed an anti-Semitism report. And last week, anti-Semitic flyers were placed around George Washington's campus. Why do college campuses seem to be such a breeding ground for Jewish hate?
I think there's a lot of activism on campus that is anti-Israel, and there's focus on making sure that in the academic realm, anti-Israel conversation and anti-Israel discussion is quite common. And so it's very easy for academic discussion to then turn into hatred and vitriol, and that then translates into flyers, vandalism, and even assault on campus.
We know the Bible says the Jews are God's chosen people. Serene, is the rise of anti-Semitism a spiritual battle?
I believe that it is. There is a spiritual dynamic here at play. And I often think about a Catholic professor whose name was Edward Flannery. And he talks about this in terms of it's very hard to understand the source of anti-Semitism, and it seems to morph in various ages, but there seems to be an underlying hatred against God and against his plan and purposes. And part of that is his choosing of the Jewish people to be a light to the world. And so I do agree with you. There is a spiritual element to this, which means that we need to think about it spiritually as well.
Amen.
Good.
And what policies and practices need to be implemented to protect our Jewish friends and neighbors?
Well, I think that before we get to policy, we need to think about our own connections to Jewish people in our lives. It's easy to look at the news and say, wow, that's really terrible, and let's tweet and let's speak out against this or that personality. But really something that I was talking with a Jewish friend and leader of an organization called Artists for Israel, Craig Dershowitz. He said, what about if even in our own churches, in our own circles, in our families, when we hear anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracy theories, can we call that out? Can we speak up in our own circles? And so I think we have a responsibility first to be active in this in our own families, our own churches, and then to think about policy.
And you can see more of this interview this evening on the prayer link. It's on the CBN News Channel at 6:30 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app. Still ahead, why a good night's sleep is important for your health and how you can get the rest you need. We're going to hear from one of the world's leading experts right after this. As we head into cold, flu, and COVID season, doctors tell us getting a good night's rest on a regular basis is good for our health. On this week's episode of Healthy Living, CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson spoke to one of the world's leading sleep experts about how to do just that.
One way to get a good night's sleep all the time is to have the same wake-up time every morning. This was new to me. Can you explain it?
Yeah. So, I think one thing that's really important is that our bodies crave predictability. Like, things just are more efficient when things are predictable. But also, one of the key pieces that regulates our sleep is our circadian clock. This is our kind of internal clock. And so one way to keep that time is to maintain a stable wake time. And so if you kind of maintain that wake time every day, you go throughout the day, you use the same kind of energy day to day, typically, you'll begin to feel sleepy around the same time each night. But I focus on the wake time because we can control that. We can control when we wake up, but we can't control when we fall asleep, right? Like, sleep is not something that we make happen. Sleep comes to us. It kind of washes over us. And so it's really important, especially for people who have sleep problems, to take the pressure off. Right? It's like, you don't need to be in bed and sleep at a certain time. You want to kind of listen for those sleepiness cues, but keeping a stable wake time can really help with that. Also, one of the things that happens with insomnia is that people try to kind of adjust their wake time based on how their night was, right? So like, they have a bad night of sleep and they'll sleep in an extra 2 hours. But what that does is it kind of throws the whole system off. It actually kind of puts you in jet lag without having any of the benefits of traveling, right? Like, all the good things you get to see, you don't get to see them. You're stuck in your same place, but now your body is off in time. And so maintaining a stable wake time 7 days a week is really helpful to kind of get that process going. I usually get, some negative feedback on this, and people who don't have a lot of sleep problems because they like to sleep in on the weekend. And that's okay. I'm not the fun police. I'm saying if you have sleep problems, this is the first place that you can start, that you can try to control this problem and kind of set your body clock, which will be really helpful in the other aspects that we can layer on related to improving your sleep.
Not the fun police. Okay, so the next one, again, I had never heard this, but it makes perfect sense. And that is, if you find yourself having a restless night, you're tossing and turning, don't stay in bed. Get up out of bed. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is a really critical one for treating people that have kind of chronic insomnia problems. What happens is that, people wake up in the middle of the night, or they get in bed and they can't sleep, and they just kind of distress, toss and turn, spend a lot of time there. And that really fractures your relationship with your bed. It turns out that your bed is such a critical environmental trigger for sleep. It kind of tells your body, it cues your body to kind of let go and be able to sleep, right? But when you spend a lot of time in bed, your body gets confused. And in fact, it creates something called a conditioned arousal, which means, like, when you're in bed, you actually become more alert. So commonly in my clinic, people will say things like, hey, I was feeling really sleepy, then I got in bed and my brain woke up. And that is just great evidence of a conditioned arousal. And so the only way to fix that is to kind of break that cycle and repair the relationship of sleepiness with the bed. So, you have your angstiness and your bed, and you need to break those apart and wait until you get sleepy again. So you don't want to turn on all the lights. You don't want to do anything really active. You want to go back to those relaxing things that are known to kind of bring on that sleepiness for you. And when you begin to feel sleepy again, you kind of repair that relationship so that, over time, when you get back in bed, the bed does what it's supposed to do, is cue you to fall asleep. And so, that is really, this conditioned arousal is often at kind of foundational in the development and progression of insomnia. And so it is something that needs to be taken care of. It is challenging. People do not like getting out of bed, and, because it feels so counterintuitive to them, right? They're just going to be awake. But the issue is that they're awake anyway. And we're the only way that we can kind of, mitigate this problem is to kind of create an environment that is, that helps facilitate sleepiness and sleep.
And you can catch more tips this evening on healthy living with Lori Johnson. You can find it on the CBN News Channel at 8:30 Eastern, or you can find it on the CBN News app. We'll be back with an encouraging word for your day ahead right after this. Stay with us. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable, and today I want to leave you with this message to post, tag, tweet, and share with those in your circles. When the difficult situation doesn't change, remember this: you still can change your perspective and look for the message in the mess, the purpose in the problem, and the testimony in the test. The trouble may last longer than you like, but it is not here to stay. Make time and learn the lesson. With that word, make this a terrific Tuesday. Well, that is a wrap for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Thank you so much for watching. I want to remind you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us. The address is right there at the bottom of your screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We certainly would love to hear from you. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.